Yeah, I'm being complimentary, but it is a three-wing circus with the clowns and the Volkswagens and the flaming hoops and stuff.
So many people are lacking the opportunity to connect with the outdoors that when they get it, they go for it without thinking.
So they didn't engage it at all. They let him have the pig, and the bear guys came and trapped the bear, and it was ancient.
And if they are in a cage and they, you peek up to the window to look at them inside the trap, you're going to pee your pants when they punch that trap, and just pound that metal grate. They're just this massive thing.
Hello, this is Hal Herring, working a podcast for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We're in Duluth, Minnesota. I'm here tonight at the Holiday Inn with Kris Millgate, having some Pabst Blue Ribbons. And we're going to talk about her work and what she does with Tightline Media, which is out of Idaho Falls, Idaho, southeast Idaho. And as she said, if you had to, people ask her why she lives there, she didn't even try to explain it, because southeast Idaho's enough explanation if you know the country there. So last time, I think the last time I saw you before on this was at the Malheur Refuge, wasn't it?
That's right. Yep. It was foggy. It was freezing.
Foggy, about right at zero or a couple of degrees. And I was wondering how your equipment possibly worked in that cold, you remember?
Yeah, I can tell you how it works. I stick all the batteries in my armpits.
Right.
Yeah.
And you make it work.
That's right.
Yeah. And did that work?
It does work, yeah.
And you were there. We were at when the Bundy occupation was at its rolling highest, actually, where they were still doing all the media show outside every morning, and all the frozen people would be in their trench coats. Remember, with the big cameras.
Yeah, what was funny about that is the conditions, like you say, are cold and they're icy, and it's uncomfortable.
It was an ice fog with rime all over the sage. Remember,
right? And the backs of the cows had like white little crisps on them.
Yeah, right.
It was beautiful for that reason.
It was, yeah.
But you were uncomfortable in the weather, and then you were uncomfortable with the people. I mean, It was this weird dynamic, and you had all these angry people walking around with their chests puffed up.
Right.
But then when they wanted to tell you something really violently because they were pissed, they had to duck walk on the ice, to get up in your face. So it kind of stole some of their thunder.
Yeah.
When they had a point to make, they had a duck walk to get to you.
Right. As they were shouting about various infringements of their constitutional rights.
Right. I'm serious. Yeah. And then there'd be this little penguin walk.
Yeah.
And I think those are some of the things that, when I'm covering a story like that, those are some of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Because not everybody sees that part.
Right.
They see him yelling, but they don't see the little penguin walk that he has to do to get up to the microphone before he yells.
Right. Or the dude who had it was like a Calvin Klein jacket, and he was so cold that he had to keep going back to the truck and getting in front of the heater.
Yeah, and that truck, do you remember how long the wheels spun out on the ice trying to get up the hill just to come talk to us?
Right.
I mean, it was a skating rink.
Yeah.
And there was this big argument.
Yeah. The only thing that was making me nervous on that was the guard tower, the fire lookout, and whoever was up in the fire lookout banging around trying to get those donuts or whatever up there.
I think they were peeing in that bucket that they were passing.
Right.
But that made me nervous also because I wanted to see the refuge, and I knew I was going to have to leave the scene where everybody was in each other's faces.
Right.
And I knew they were watching from that watchtower.
Right.
And I knew they were armed.
Right.
And I thought, well, I want to go look around. I've never been here. I want to see Malheur. I want to see the pheasants. I did. I want to see the deer. I did. But I had to go farther out. And I figured, well, I have a video camera. So if they're going to do anything to me, that would be a very big mistake because I will be rolling.
They would at least be on camera while they were doing it.
Right.
Yeah. For posterity. Yeah. I just was that was a scene. I admired your aplomb.
Is that right?
Yeah, because it was. When everybody pulled up there, I mean, it was. You couldn't really tell what you were pulling into, and it turned out. Well, it could have turned out anyway because you got a lot of weapons and you got a lot of angry folks, and they're all waving their not just the little annotated Leon Skousen constitutions, but they're kind of waving some fierce indignation. Out there that I just, and as you got to talking to them, it was a nutty scene. There was no doubt about that.
Yeah. And there's lots of times in my career when I'm covering a story that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable behind the lens or in front of the lens, that I can hear my mom in my head saying, you don't have a danger gene. You should be scared.
Right.
In these situations.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
And so if I look at it as if I'm doing a story, I'm usually more calm about what's going on than everybody else is.
Yeah. And you got a job to do too. I mean, that's one of the things I was watching, and it's like this is a person at work, which is pretty cool. So let's talk about that work.
Yeah, I'm pretty obsessive about it.
Yeah, well, it seems like you do a whole lot of it, so what does Tightline Media do?
Tightline Media is a production company, and when I first started my career, I was a broadcast journalist, and I worked for TV stations across the country for a decade. And I decided to go freelance so that I could still do TV.
Yeah.
But I could also be making films.
Right.
I could work for a newspaper. I could work for a magazine.
Yeah.
Work for the web. All the mediums were going to mesh together, and I wanted in on that.
Yeah.
So I went.
You saw that coming.
I did. And Tightline Media is 11 years old. We started in 2006. And I could just sense that everything was going to go together. And I've always been able to write. It doesn't matter if it's for a screen or for paper.
You bet.
And so I could make that transition fairly well, and I went for it and started working for everybody, and also went from just Idaho to all over the country.
Yeah, well, and what's the focus?
Well, it's anything. It's outdoors, but when you're talking outdoors, people will say, "Well, are you hook and bullet?"
Yeah.
Yep, I cover hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
But there's hike and bike too.
Right.
I grew up hiking and biking, and hunting and fishing is part of my life now.
Yeah.
I don't see the divide between that.
Right, I never have either.
I don't understand where that comes in. We all use the same land.
Right.
And while the story may be hook and bullet, there is no hook and bullet unless there's conservation.
Right, that's right.
So to me, that's a very compelling story that I never want to pass over either.
You bet. And that's what Rich Landers and Pat Ray and I were talking about with being here in Duluth, we sat through that presentation. It was really, really good about the attempted the efforts. It's not attempted; it's working. But to clean up Lake Superior out here, and how that's turned the economy around 180 degrees. And we're talking about ecology is economy, and you can do what they did. And I don't want to go back through this because I talked about it already. But you could take all the trees and mine out all the ore and wreck all the rivers. And now there was money made, there's no doubt. And then now 100 years later, we're still paying it off, and hadn't even really started addressing the main debt. There's millions are flowing out to try to get it back to something like it was, and it's working. I was looking at the lake and all, this morning. It's so beautiful. But that's been a fundamental of mine forever. Ecology is economy. You can say it's not, and then pick up the pieces later,
And I've watched over my career I call it kind of the evolution of how we value our resources.
Right.
It's not all about mining, logging, and drilling and what we can get out of it.
Right.
People are starting to realize there's value in leaving the land as it is, or, my favorite, putting it back together.
Right.
And, when in the industrial time of a town, you can tell that they've turned their back to the river.
Right.
And now we're turning toward it. We're making green belts. We're restoring rivers.
Yep.
And I think that's a huge change in this whole country. We're thinking differently about our natural resources.
Yeah. And it's been over a lot of people where I grew up in Alabama, that like the Clean Water Act cleaned up the Tennessee, and then everybody turned back, towards that river for sure. And we don't want to have to go into this, but now they seem to have forgotten how they got what they got, and they're like, regulation, and you're like going, well, dude, you have a house on Guntersville Lake. You're a professional bass fisherman,
Yeah, you need bass.
Yeah, you're going to need some bass, and the value of your land is based on the clean water that was produced by hard-working people who got sensible regulations on people dumping stuff on in your river.
We have a new section of the Snake River in Idaho Falls that's being restored as a rock garden. And when you say
a rock garden, what do you mean?
They've taken, when they there's lava rock and the river runs right through town. And when they built the hydropower plants that are run of the river, they had to pull out some of the rock.
Yeah.
There's no big dams. The river runs.
Yeah.
But there's lava rock that had to come out.
Yeah.
It sat for 40 years. All of a sudden, developers want to build along the bank, and it's a junkyard. Mm-hmm. And they bring in this lava rock, start placing it in all these strategic, really cool ways, and turn it into a rock garden with layers and plants and sitting areas and places to fish.
Yeah.
And it's some of it can go underwater, like right now when there's a flood.
Right.
But it's more natural, but it's not a junkyard. And there's parts in there now where the junkyard couldn't be removed because it was grown into the tree.
You bet.
And so you can still see spots of, this is what we were.
Right.
Pathetic mess.
Right.
And here's what we are. It's brilliantly beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
With a rock that was always there anyway.
Yeah. So did that come to you later? I mean, as you were doing all this work, did you come to the work with an appreciation for stuff like that?
I have always felt comfortable outside. And I grew up not fishing with my dad, not hunting with my dad. I grew up hiking with my dad.
Uh-huh. This is in Utah.
And I grew up in Utah, right. Yeah. And we would hike those Wasatch Mountains, and I would follow his dusty frame for miles. And it was miles because he didn't have an internal compass, so he was always lost. Uh-huh. And we would wander, and I was onto him. It wasn't around the next bend. We weren't getting anywhere. But I learned patience from following him. I learned endurance, which helps me with my job now when we're chasing elk. Yeah. And I learned persistence. I won't quit. Right. If you think the story's too hard or I shouldn't be there. Yeah. I'm not going to quit. I'll stick with it. And being out on the land in that way made me really appreciate it. That's where I feel comfortable. Right. I want to have these places to go. I grew up with public land. Right. I work there. I play there. It means a tremendous amount to me. Yeah. And so that appreciation has only grown as I've gotten older, but it's always been there in some form. Right. Yeah, that's what, and for me too. I mean, that's what we had a dearth of public lands in Alabama where I grew up, and then when I was in college, we had a kind of an inner map of every piece of Talladega National Forest or Okmulgee State Forest where you could go because you can't go anywhere else. And the fishing was pretty good, but even that was limited access in places. There was the best place to fish was near the police firing range, and these college kids had drowned there. You know, it's a whitewater little like a tail race. Mm-hmm. It was incredible striper fishing, and so there was no way we were going to stay away from it. But you had to surreptitiously go down there. And if they saw you, that you could be cited for trespassing just because somebody drowned there. And in my opinion, it was like if you drown there, that's your fault. It doesn't mean that I can't catch these big stripers there. But that's not the way the law saw it in Alabama. And so we spent every kind of weird way trying to get in there and get onto the stripers, before, once we fled in a canoe that we brought up from the Black Warrior River. I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah. I look back on that and I'm just like, man, we should have just been free to fish that and wander that. And if you drown, that's your fault. That's the way it is in the Lewis and Clark National Forest where I live. Well, and I think there's something to what you're saying there. You went to great extremes to get into there. We did. And you did it because whether or not you realize it or anybody in this country realize it, we have this innate desire for an outdoor connection. Right. And 12-pound stripers. Well, and when you see tourists coming, particularly too close to where I live, which is Yellowstone, they do things that just seem unbelievable. And the reason they're doing them, I think, is because they're so desperate for that connection to the outdoors that they put blinders on and they go for it. And the buffalo ends up in the back seat. Sure. And or the tourist ends up in the top of the tree with the buffalo hooking him again. Yeah, or they're walking out on that crust that says, do not step here. Right. So many people are lacking the opportunity to connect with the outdoors that when they get it, they go for it without thinking. It's almost desperation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, these connections, like when in your work, obviously there's been a million of them. So million and two. So what are some of the favorite, what are some of the jobs you've had that people would just really I know people are interested in a self-built business like yours, but what does it mean to have that? What do you do? Well, first off, you have to be risky. Yeah. That danger gene my mother says I don't have. She's right. I don't. I'm okay with risk. I'm okay with challenges. A lot of times the conditions that I work in are what other people don't want to put up with.
Right.
And I'm okay with that too.
Right.
I think that I've always known I was going to tell stories. Mm-hmm. And I always knew I would be a reporter. I didn't know I would be my own boss and run Tightline Media. I thought I would always be in a newsroom with a news director.
Right.
And I didn't know that I would narrow my niche down to outdoors. But then nobody else in the newsroom was carrying around boots. And I would get muddy. I could go from crops to crime in the same day. And so those stories just started to come. And I really liked them. And I think people were intrigued by them. And I would get to sort cutthroat trout and band bald eagles and trap grizzlies. I mean, we're in this section of the country that has everything.
Right.
So I want to stay here and cover everything so that I can be the messenger and share it with everyone. And I take that serious. You've got to be ethical. It's got to be balanced. It's got to be factual. I don't do any of that half-assed. And I think that's very important in the way the story comes across. So I'm curious about what's going on. I don't care if it's hard. I'm still going to go. Right. And so those are some of the elements I have to go into getting these kind of stories. It's not a glamorous, pretty walk in the park, by a long shot.
I've seen some of your stuff, and like when you're working in the cold. And I know I want to get into this later, but I know you're a trail runner. So my son is also a distance runner, and in the 3200. And he says there's an elite class. And a lot of these guys are Native Americans that he runs with, and an elite class of masochists.
I would say that's true. So, not just being a journalist, but being self-employed like I am, especially in the field that I am an anomaly. There's not many women out me running around in the woods. Right. And doing it self-employed. Right. And I'm kind of a beast on my own back. So I'm always trying to be better, make it look better, make it the best piece I can do. And at the same time, I have those traits inside of me, whether or not I'm telling a story. So I think that, I'm kind of a glutton for punishment.
Right. He would say that too. Yeah.
And I like that longer run. Right. I like the wilderness I see in that longer run that many people will never see. Right. And so there's that challenge dynamic that I seem to be drawn to. Yeah. And what are some of like some of the best stuff you've covered? And I know y'all did well at the Malheur covering that, but just like of all the stories, what stands out? More recent, I know you've done too many of them to run through because I've followed a lot of them myself that you did. It's going to be trapping and tracking grizzly bears, and it's the top of the food chain animal, so you think that's the no-brainer. But it's the things about covering that people don't think about that stand out in my mind.
The work itself.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, when you come up on a grizzly bear and he's trapped by just a piece of cable that looks like dental floss to a tree. Yeah. He's pissed. Yeah. And he makes sounds like you've never heard. Yeah. And even from a mile.
Now, where are you at this point? Where were you?
So I've gone trapping and tracking grizzly bears in Island Park, Idaho. Okay. And there's a multi-state effort for grizzly bears. Well, they're federal, and there's Montana and Idaho and Wyoming, and they all three states help the federal government manage and track the grizzly bears. They need to know how many there are, what they eat, where they go, why they go there, and they can go 1,400 miles in a summer. It's amazing. And they're swimming across reservoirs multiple times, walking through cabins. I mean, they're among us. Don't fool yourself. Yeah. And so all of that's been monitored to see how their recovery's gone and shown that the numbers have gone up. Mm-hmm.
So this is the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem Max.
Yes, right. And so the Idaho Fish and Game, their bear crew, after many, many years of me being persistent and patient and enduring all their no's, I got a yes to go. And I think it came down to the fact that I don't show up in high heels at my story. Right. And I'm not here to dink around. Mm-hmm. I know you have a job to do, and so do I. So I'm going to stay out of your way. But I think it was kind of the point where we had enough grizzlies that people needed to know that they were out here, and this is what we do when we want to check on them.
Right.
And so that's how I got in on the grizzly bears. And it was a lot of years of reporting before that happened. That's not.
You had to be persistent with the state agency.
Yeah, and go figure. Yeah. But it wasn't, and it's not for someone that's new either.
Right.
And there's special rules you've got to follow. You've got to obviously carry bear spray.
Yeah.
But when you come up on a grizzly, you know before you see the trap site that he's there, because you don't hear anything else. Mm-hmm. There's no birds. They're there, but they're being quiet.
Right.
And it's almost like the wind stops, but it's just a silent feeling. And then there's this rumble, and it's he can see you coming.
Yeah.
And there's a rumble like you have a car under 5 feet of snow, and the motor's running.
Wow.
It's really low and from the gut. And he's warning you, you're getting close, and he's saying, I'm here. And then he realizes he's still attached by, I'm sure it's a very sturdy cable.
Right.
But it looks like dental floss to me.
Yeah. And this is a cam lock snare, right?
I don't know the official name of them. Yeah. It probably would be something like that. It's a loop, and it catches them on the leg.
Right.
And the reason they sometimes have to go to snare traps around a tree is because they have the big barrel traps,
right.
And the bears get smart. And so they will reach in and grab all the bait except for the bait that closes the door.
Right, gotcha.
So they start going to a snare. And the bears are really mad about that snare trap.
Yeah, I bet.
And so you've got to get in there, and they've got to be tranquilized, and the roar they'll make is just tremendous. And if they are in a cage and they, you peek up to the window to look at them inside the trap,
you're
going to pee your pants when they punch that trap, and just pound that metal grate. They're just this massive thing.
Yeah.
But then they go to sleep, and it's an operating room in the middle of the forest.
Yeah.
And that the work that the researchers do is remarkable. They know they have 45 minutes to take hair samples, check teeth, weigh them. You're lifting 800 pounds sometimes.
Right. And it's all loose too, right? It's like super hard to move.
Yes.
I've just seen the pictures of it. I've never been around it.
Yeah. And it's usually, 4 biologists will be doing it.
Do they smell super strong?
That's a great question.
This is what this rancher told me, that he had one that was in an irrigation ditch, and he could smell it before he saw it.
That's very true. So I have a very sensitive nose. When I've gone to tag pelicans, I've thrown up. Mm-hmm. It's an ungodly smell, and
did they throw up on you as a defense?
That's kind of like their panic mode. Pronghorn are the same way. They're real sensitive. Pelicans will throw up, and they'll throw up 5 pounds of trout all over you. And they smell because they're wet and they're having babies. It's just this god-awful mess. Yeah. Grizzlies smell just as bad. I mean, they're opportunists. They eat roadkill.
Oh, yeah.
And to get trapped, they have eaten, they're very serious about what they put out. It's elk. It says roadkill elk laying out there.
Right.
So it's rotten meat and sitting in the sun.
Right. I think they like that, right?
Oh, it's an easy meal.
Yeah.
They want it.
Right.
And so... they smell from that, but they're also dirty. So there's all kinds of things in that fur.
Yeah.
And one time we had one that had a gunshot wound, and he'd been collared. They put a GPS collar on him when they have him in a trap for tests, and he'd been trapped before. So they checked the gunshot wound from a few months back, and it was full of maggots. They left the maggots.
Right.
It's that natural. Right.
Yeah, right.
That's
in the
process.
U.S. Forces, Special Forces, like Emergency Medical Handbook.
Oh.
That's one way to clean out before you get gangrene if you got nothing else.
Well.
So they were working for him.
It might have been working, but he didn't smell good.
Yeah.
He had all kinds of smell. And when you touched his fur, just all this dirt would come up, and you have no idea what's in there. They're walking around in there. They're not bathing.
Right. Where was the gunshot wound?
It was kind of like up on here on his shoulder, but past the big hump that grizzly bears are known for. And it was healing fine.
Yeah.
They measure their claws and their feet. All that goes on. And they watch the clock, and they watch their breathing.
Yeah.
And on one of the bears, we thought we had 45 minutes like standard. And so when it was kind of like an open area, I laid down on my stomach to try to get that cool shot of the bear's nose on video, and his breathing. And it's this real slow in and out, deep, low growling snore. They snore. And I'm laying belly on my belly, the bear's on his belly, and I'm looking through my lens, and I see his eye open. And I'm thinking, that's not good. That's not good. So I lift up my head from my camera, and I said, hey, his eyes are open. And the biologist says, no problem, no problem. That's the medicine.
Right. He's
just twitching. So I get back down there, and then he opens his eyes, and he's looking right at me, and I stop. My camera's still rolling.
Yeah.
And I lift my head up, and he lifts his head up.
Ooh.
And then I think, okay, I'm going to push up. It's instinct. You want to move,
Right.
And then he pushes up, and then I pee my pants.
Yeah.
Because he's up, and I say, okay, no, I'm not kidding. He's really up.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this realization that he's a young bear, and it's worn off at 35 minutes instead of 45.
And where was the biologist at that moment?
He went from about right next to me to get the next shot with about half a second of speed. I mean, he was on it. And I said, I don't want to get up because it's like we're playing Simon Says. When I lift up, he lifts up. So, let's do something here. When they're asleep, the medicine wears off from nose to toes.
Okay.
So he's smelling me, and he does this, snucking thing at me because he wants to know what's in his face.
Right.
What's the smell?
Right.
It's probably urine because I'm scared. and so then he's lights out, and we can finish what we're doing and get the collar on him, and it's over with. But it's that moment where he's wanting to know just as much about you as you're wanting to know about him.
Yeah.
And he has the upper hand.
Yeah, for sure.
And if ever I was going to have a danger gene, it should have kicked in then.
Right.
But
were you super thrilled at the experience? And did you get what did that look like on camera?
I have it.
I've never seen that. Yeah.
You can see him go, with his nose at
Yeah.
me, and it's close. And he's got an oxygen tube in, and he wants it out because he's really trying to get a sniff on me.
Right.
But I mean, his paws are as big as my head.
Wow.
And I'm in between him, nose to nose.
Yeah.
And then you see, I'm trying. The thing that's crazy is I'm still in work mode.
Yeah.
And so it's a fantastic shot until I really start. I really jump, and then you see like the camera, and it's like, okay, I really need to go. He's really awake.
Yeah.
But because it wears off from nose to toes, he's not going to be able to run.
Right.
He's up, and his tongue's going, and his nose is going, and he knows I'm there. And the second he can move, he wants to get me out of the way.
Right, sure. And probably kill you. Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. I mean, they're just like, they're so, I was up in Ear Mountain up near Shodo. It was years ago. I had my dog with me, this old pit bull, and she was smart enough not to mess with this bear, but he was digging up ants. And one of those, those ants that pile up all they're red and black, and they go everywhere, and they make those big mounds. He was digging this thing up, and it was probably 80 yards or so. And he was right out in the open. It's prairie mostly in there. And I stopped, and I told the dog, I said, don't do it. Just stay with me. And mostly she listened, but she was a Staffordshire. They have their own brain. And she was looking at him, and he looked up, and he locked eyes with us. And then he just went back to digging those ants, but digging it more. You know what I mean? Like more. You could see the muscles in his shoulders, and it was. I swear it was like this is you. I'm digging ants, but it was. He locked eyes with us for just a second. He didn't run, and 99% of them that we see are hightailing it, unless they're in Glacier Park. They see us in book. And this one he was not leaving those ants, man. I don't know. He really liked those ants.
Can you imagine how many ants they have to eat?
I can't imagine. But they do it. You can see them.
They love them. They find a log, and they'll dig a date bed. Yeah. They write down, and it's bed and breakfast. They just nap all afternoon and eat ants. It sounds all right to me, I guess.
For sure.
If you like ants.
If you like ants, like a lot of ants. Yeah.
And, when I'm out running trail or just last weekend mountain biking with our boys.
Mm-hmm.
We have bear spray. My boys know how to use it.
Yeah.
But I have a sensitive nose, so I can usually smell them.
Oh, really?
And I'm pretty sure there was some chuffing going on the trail last weekend, and that made me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But they don't want to be by you.
Right. That's been our experience completely in the Bob Marshall, in the Scapegoat, and out on the prairie.
You just do a hey bear, ho bear as you walk into the trees or into a meadow. Just think of it as like changing rooms in your house.
Yeah.
When the setting changes a bit, hey bear, I'm coming through the door.
Right.
Hey bear, ho bear, and they'll move along. They're not waiting for you to come through so they can pounce you. That's not what they're doing.
Right. No, yeah. It did that. I don't remember the name of the law enforcement officer, the Forest Service guy that mountain biked right into that bear and got killed.
Yes, I know that
last
case
spring.
well.
Yeah. And that was well, I mean, you're mountain biking the bear. It wasn't anybody's fault on that except for hell bent mountain biking down, and you hit a bear instead of everything going okay. You know,
you get a blind curve and it's timing. 3 seconds later, the bear would have been across.
That's right.
You slammed right into him and fell right into his lap.
Right.
I mean,
and I've done some mountain biking west of my house in a deep summer, and it's the same thing. And I had that same complete hair on your neck stands up, and there wasn't a bear there, but there's bears there all the time, and that was what I thought as I cut around this cut bank, at full speed. I was like, you can't see what's on the other side, and there's lots of grizzly bears that go back and forth to this little place called Bar Creek. They got something they do down there. I don't know what it is, but you can see one up there fairly consistently, like once a year.
What it is probably food motivated.
Yeah, for sure. He's going down there and running the creek, and there's more stuff on the creek than whatever they're doing at that time. They're kind of inscrutable to me.
When you were out in the woods and you come through timber and you smell cows.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
There's not a grazing allotment there.
Right.
That's elk.
Right.
So when you come through trees and you smell dead.
Yeah.
It may not be a dead animal. It might be a grizzly.
Yeah.
They smell. And when you stick not like you have the luxury of doing this, but I did because the bears are asleep. When you stick your fingers down in their fur.
Yeah.
Their coats are really thick and dense and coarse and deep.
Uh-huh.
Your fingers sink all the way in.
Right.
And you're touching this thing
this primordial
that owns the woods, and thank goodness he's asleep.
Yeah. They're hot all the time, I think.
Yeah, when we're at a trap site, we have to make sure we're sensitive to the shade.
Yeah.
And watch their temperature and work fast for that reason
because
too.
that hide holds so much heat. Right.
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know the ranger where we live, he watched this one floating in the North Fork of the South Fork of the Sun River. And he came and he said for the longest time I couldn't figure out what it was, right? It was just this blob. And he said, and then it got one, it was sprawled out, both arms out, and his arm came out and wiped these mosquitoes off his face. But even his head his ears and everything were under. It was laid flat in this eddy.
What a privilege to get to watch that.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, the guy was on his horses, and so he just slowed down. And it's far enough away where you're looking way down. He showed me where it was, but I thought they must be hot most of the time.
Yeah, and they're certainly not getting in there to wash off. They're just cooling off.
No, they're just cooling off. He said it was just laying there on his back.
But what's interesting now is like in Yellowstone, now that there's more cutthroats in the tribs because they're working on the lake trout issue.
Right.
Grizzly bears are keying in on those tributaries.
Yeah, the Trout Unlimited guys were in here last night, and Brett Prettyman's been going up there.
Yeah.
He told me that too.
And I think you'll see that in Island Park too, coming out of Henry's Lake.
Yeah.
And Henry's Fork. And there's more rainbows in Henry's Fork, but there's cutthroats coming out of Henry's Lake on that outlet, and those bears will get in those willows.
Right, like Alaska.
Yeah. And I think what you're going to see happen is people's awareness is going to have to go up, whether they want it to or not. There's all these garbage cans up there that are still in the process of being transferred to bear-proof bins. And there really shouldn't be barbecues and bird feeders out anymore.
Right.
But it's still this huge education hurdle that we have to get over. People aren't quite convinced that they've got to change the way they live, work, and play in bear country.
Right.
And they do.
Right. Yeah, we have a friend who works with me on this sagebrush restoration stuff in Idaho, and which sometime I'll talk to you about that. We're planting the Blair fire, and replanting the sagebrush on that to try to get ahead of the Medusa head and the cheatgrass.
Right.
And I got this incredible crew of people everybody from professional kayakers up to a homesteader in the Yak who come down and they all plant. And I mean, it's a paid gig; it ain't volunteer. But he had there's not very many grizz in the Yak, and a bear got his pig this last winter, or early spring, and no, it must have been in fall because there was berries. So he had seen the scat, and there was all these huckleberries in it, which they're too low elevation to have huckleberries. So he knew this creature was traveling, but he didn't really associate it with grizzlies, you know. Anyway, it got his pig, and hogs are part of their business, and it dragged the pig off, and he had a black bear tag. So he and his son went out and were pursuing this thing to get the pig back and then to get a black bear.
Get the pig back?
Yeah, pig back. And so Jeremy said he actually flipped on the headlamp. He had a big, powerful, like coon hunter's headlamp. And it was with the pig. And it turned out his son had like an AK-47 and Jeremy had a shotgun. But he's a really good guy. Like he said, man, I didn't want to shoot the only grizzly bear we'd ever seen down there, And so they didn't engage it at all. They let him have the pig, and the bear guys came and trapped the bear, and it was ancient. Like its teeth were all worn out, and it had been on the drift, from somewhere up high. They said because they had seen the scat, but he said they trapped it and moved it.
There's some of the bears that one in particular that we trapped one time was mid-20s, their teeth start going.
This was mid-20s, yeah.
They're going to look for softer foods to eat, easier meals. It's garbage, whatever.
What brought me up that was like if my barbecue grill, which is in my yard, were that much grease,
right?
You'd almost have to. I mean, you couldn't leave it out there,
right?
Just because some of them aren't doing as well, and they got to take what they can get.
Yeah, and they start losing weight, and now we have a lot of bears. I mean, we've been trying to bring them. The recovery effort is into 4 decades now, so there's some bears that have been on the endangered species list since they were born.
Right.
And now they're 30.
Right.
They're getting up there.
And so, do you have a position on the delisting?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I do think that they are on the landscape.
Yep.
Just like wolves.
Yeah.
We're past debating about whether they should be here or not be here or how many should be here. They're here.
Right.
From all I've seen in the way that it's researched out by the numbers, there's a significant amount of them here. Mm-hmm. Now, I know when I go to Salmon, Idaho, and I run and raft on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River,
okay,
I don't need to worry about bear spray as much as I do when I'm in Island Park, Idaho. And that's because grizzlies really just aren't there yet.
Right.
So they're not everywhere, but in the spot where we're talking with the Island Park area and around Yellowstone, they're there.
Yeah.
And there's going to have to be a management tool of some kind. I know not everybody wants to hunt.
Right.
I certainly have no interest in shooting a grizzly bear. But there's a lot of them there, and that's probably going to be on the table, just like it was with wolves.
Right.
The thing that I think will help the grizzly bear that no one's really thinking about right now because they're really doing the polarizing situation.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too.
Yeah, but what you have to remember is grizzly bears hibernate.
Mm-hmm.
So they're only really causing you a problem 8 months out of the year, where wolves are year-round.
Right.
And that's a different element.
Yeah. Wolves
also make babies a lot faster than grizzly bears.
Right.
So
they're more prolific.
Yeah, but then on the other side, a wolf's just going to look at you and say, "I dare you." Mm-hmm. Where there's going to be no attack there. Whereas a grizzly is going to say, "Get out of my way."
Right.
So the dynamic's interesting. I mean, where we live has all these stories that are just top of the line for outdoor issues.
Right.
And people want to bang heads about it. And I've been yelled at from both sides about it because they're just so passionate about it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes living and working here so great. We have these issues. We have wildfires and floods and salmon and grizzlies and wolves and people really say some things about that are just visceral.
Yeah.
And then the story just lays out. That's what I like to see.
I bet. Yeah. And I did the wolf, I reported the wolf thing for, I would always say ad nauseum. I finally.
We all feel that way.
Yeah. I finally kind of just backed away, and let other people have whatever is coming next, But that was a lot of, for a journalist, that was really interesting for a long time. It really was hot. It was where the rubber meets the road and where the tire is hottest, for a long time. And people in the Southeast and stuff, my friends, they didn't follow that. But everybody in the West followed it.
Well, and now you'll see it repeat. So when wolves entered our landscape,
right, it
was ranchers upset about their livestock.
Right.
Well, then who was next? The outfitters were upset about the elk.
Right.
Loss of livestock, loss of elk.
Right.
Now in Oregon, you have cattle ranchers losing livestock.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like it's repeating, and they're a decade or two behind what we did in Idaho, and you're just going to see this kind of continue. Right.
The anger wave.
Yeah, and the same with grizzly bears. You want to bring them back into that part of the Northwest. Well, they're probably 20 years behind where we are around Yellowstone.
Yeah. And the cabinets, they're showing up. We see them. I wouldn't say that I see 3 every summer. I just see a few every summer, and some summers I see none. And other times you see them way out on the prairie, and you got, and totally in Congress, you can't. Of course, during Lewis and Clark's time, that's where they all lived.
Right.
But I think you're in an extraordinary lucky place, to have this many vibrant issues, the elk hunters are so passionate about elk hunting, and the ranchers are passionate about holding on to a way of life, which I live right in the middle of a ranch town. It's a good way of life. It's really yes, it's hard work and stuff, but everything's hard work nowadays,
Yes.
And it's self-directed, and it's good. And I understand why you wouldn't want anybody to mess it up. I'm right there with them on that. But I just think I'm in it too, and it's why I live where I do. Is anybody who thinks that things aren't like world-changing events aren't happening right in the Rocky Mountain West or the Inland West or the Prairie is missing the whole sight, the whole picture.
Yeah, a lot of times when people say, you work all over the country, yet your base camp is Idaho.
Yeah.
Why Idaho?
Right.
My answer is why not?
Right.
If you're asking me that, you haven't seen the vast natural resources that we have, the access that we have to those resources. And on top of that is this dynamic storytelling potential that I'm sitting right on top of. I'm not a black hole that has no stories for media. It's the honey hole.
It's a honey hole for sure. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel. And I'm actually exhausted a lot of times by the things that I don't get to cover, like that I'm racing at. And something else will turn and pull you to another way.
That's so true. Yeah. And that's a luxury, I guess. People say, how do you get your story ideas? How do you come up with stuff?
Yeah.
People tell me things. I listen to what's going on. But I also look around. There's the potential for stories is endless. And those stories have a function, and they have meaning, and they tell you something. And they're not just fluff. And you can really dig in on some stuff, and sometimes it is frustrating because you think, "Oh, I missed that."
Yeah, I do. But, I do it all the time, right?
You're sorting things.
Yeah, and even I had Ashley Peters here. She works for Audubon, and she's really gotten interested. She grew up in Iowa in what we call and no offense to agriculture, right? But it's the corn desert, and she had found some native prairie there. And was looking at it, and just obviously, when you're born in a place, that place is imprinted on you to the max. Even if it's a corn desert, there's some part of you that is influenced by the way that place is and was. And she's really interested in this in prairie, like native prairie. Where is it left, and what's it? And I'm fascinated by that idea, and even those stories, like where we are, it's controversial. The American Prairie Foundation has bought all that shortgrass prairie, and they're using the BLM leases to put some buffalo on, and they really are restoring the creeks And people get furious at them when they say restoring it. We're ranchers and we've managed this land. That's why you wanted it in the first place. But it's a willing buyer, willing seller relationship. So they can't take anything from anybody. They're buying ranches and kind of restoring the creeks. But it's a very interesting thing because not that much of that prairie's left, in the whole world. And you go out there and you look at it and you go, holy smokes, it's incredibly vibrant. There's a lot going on. And where I live, the prairie meets the mountains. And so you've got just like everything's going. To me, it's like one of the most interesting places in the world.
And it's this glorious ecosystem sitting right there.
It's sitting right there. And it's not, I mean, I don't know if there's anything such thing as intact, but it's really going. Like there's like where you are, there's the Snake River is incredible. I mean, I just got kind of put on to that doing this sagebrush work.
People will say, well, you grew up in Utah. Wasn't your point to get home? You know what? At first it kind of was. I wanted to work in the Salt Lake City market. And then I started moving around the country to bigger TV stations and networks. And the bigger the city, the worse my lifestyle. Uh-huh. And so I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to live where I could raise my kids, where I had access to wilderness. And do I miss the Wasatch Mountains in Utah? You bet.
Right.
And sometimes I feel exposed because I grew up with those mountains around me.
Yeah.
But would I trade them for the Snake River? No way.
Right. In a way, too, because I think the West was run by nomads until we showed up and started settling things. You're still kind of the Wasatch is really a few days horseback ride away.
That's true. I'm not that far. I fly out of there all the time.
Yeah.
And I look at those mountains all the way down I-15.
Right.
So, and I still play there. Mm-hmm. But I do find it interesting to cover issues. One of the things I like about it is the fact that when I'm talking with someone in an interview, I want them to feel comfortable.
Right.
And I don't want to sway what they're going to say.
Right.
And I don't have to agree with what they say. That's not my place. It's not about what I'm thinking at the time. Right. You tell me how it is, and don't worry about whether or not I'm going to like it.
Right.
And that's how the story should be.
You bet. Oh, to me, it's never what you hope it is, what you want it to be, what you think it should be. It's the discipline is to approach it and see what it really is, and it's independent of your own biases or opinions. That's a really interesting thing to do, by the way. I know you do it all the time.
Yeah, and even in my shots, I'm not going to change a natural resource landscape to get a prettier shot. Uh-huh. It is what it is when I shoot it.
Right.
I don't fix it in post. If I don't do it right in the field, I shouldn't be using it.
Right.
So I want it to be as real and as authentic as I can get. Yeah. And that is very important in my style of storytelling.
Yeah. So I was asking you earlier because I'm trying to figure out the technology here. And did you learn all that on your own, like camera work and all that stuff? How do you do that?
Well,
I mean, obviously, if you're in broadcast, somebody else handled that at one point.
Actually, for like a live shot in a newscast, yes, somebody else is running that camera. Yeah. But I've always shot my own stories,
oh, you did? Gotcha.
And I can work with a cameraman. And sometimes when I'm a producer for like a PBS show, they send a cameraman. Yeah. But I like to shoot, and I like the circus that's going on in my head. I'm putting shots together right there. I don't do it all when I get back. When my camera goes back in my backpack, I pretty much know how my story's going to lay out. And I
haven't known you for a while. It's a 3-ring circus as well. I ain't trying to. I'm trying to.
That's right. It's not a circus. It's a 3-ring circus.
Yeah,
You're right.
I'm being complimentary, but it is a 3-ring circus with the clowns and the Volkswagens and the flaming hoops and stuff.
All that, and the bearded lady.
And the bearded lady. She's on her way.
Yeah, and so I learned gear. I'm not really techie. My brother can build you a computer out of a paperclip. I can't do that. But I want to do this story, and I want to do it right, and I want everything to look and sound right. Even the words have to be right. Yeah. And so it's worth it. It was worth it to me to learn everything about the gear, so that my story would be that much better. And
also yours.
Yes.
Right. That's what I keep coming back to in your work, is that there's an autonomy there where it's Kris Millgate's work. Whereas versus a bunch of editors and a bunch of people wanting to direct it this way or that way, and
that requires
that you wear the hat, you learn the trade.
Right.
Yeah.
Before you throw any tricks, you need to know the trade. And
Right.
when I worked in small TV markets, you needed to know how to do every job because you were doing every job.
Yeah.
And new reporters would resent that. I embraced that because now I can do all those jobs without having to bring 10 people and look fancy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the technology part's different. You know, I jumped to 4K equipment this year.
Right. I don't know what that is.
It goes from it's 4 times better than HD.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like 400 times more expensive.
Uh-huh.
And so there's this, you know, I'm using this gear that the first day I take out, I'm thinking about how much it costs versus what the shot looks like.
Right.
And so you kind of got to get over that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And keep up with the technology so that you can do your job without worrying about the technical aspects of it.
Right.
But I don't build websites.
Mm-hmm.
I can't pick up a pencil and sketch you out art.
Mm-hmm.
But present something to me and I'll make art on the screen or on the page.
Right.
That's how I deliver my art. It's got to be there first.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make it pretty, but once it's right in front of me, I'll show it to you exactly in its truest form.
Wow, that's cool. That's a great way of putting it too. Does all of this leave time for is your work your primary driver? Well, you got children.
I do have children, and I have a husband.
When
I speak, people always ask how I do that. And one time I was speaking at a school, and the college girl, it was a church school, and she raised her hand and she said, "Well, how do you have kids?"
Yeah.
And I said, "The same way you do, girl."
Yeah.
And she, what she meant was, how do you juggle it? And I think it was very important for me right at that moment to make her realize that she can do whatever she wants, whether it's my job or another job. It's not either or. I'm not a mom or a journalist. Right. I'm both.
You bet.
And my kids know that. So I juggle that. And sometimes it can get out of whack. You know, we're here in Duluth. I've never been here. It's a fantastic trip.
Right.
My kids are at summer hockey camp with my husband.
Uh-huh.
So
where is that?
That's in Sun Valley, Idaho this week.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there's a trade-off. But now I'm not on the 10 o'clock news anymore, so I don't have to stay up till 11 o'clock at night. I tuck them in bed at night, and we've figured it out.
Right.
But certainly, I've been called a workaholic, and that's probably true.
Right.
And I'm okay with all my quirks and my obsessiveness and my work ethic.
Right. Well, Confucius is the one that said, if you find something that you truly are compelled to do, you don't really work.
That's true.
And that's happened to me. I mean, writing is work to me. There's no doubt about it. And it's excruciating sometimes to sit down and bring that much focus to anything. But the rest of it is I would do it if you had to pay to do it. Some of it, I
do know, but actually, you say it's excruciating. It's an excruciating pleasure.
Yeah, it is, and it's a level of focus. Like I don't think my brain's going to atrophy anytime. It's like it might blow up.
Yeah, I think we have to enjoy learning too.
Yeah.
It's beyond curiosity. It's learning something new.
You bet.
I had never seen the Curlew grasslands, and I'm working on a new film about the Curlew National Grassland.
Where is that?
That is in southern Idaho, Rockland. Down by Rockland.
I don't know that at all.
You go towards American Falls. No one knows it.
I know where that is.
And it's cow country, and they're still learning what easements are.
Right.
They've got a long way to go for these grasslands.
Yeah.
But just learning about new places, and people will say, I've lived in Idaho my whole life, and you've showed me more of this state than I could have ever seen.
Right. And there's something you could put on your tombstone.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it'll probably be work for it rather than wish for it.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
What do you mean?
Well, on my tombstone, people say, if you could do anything, what would it be? And I say, I don't understand the question. I'm doing it.
Right.
I'm going to work for this, not wish for this.
Right. That's all. Yeah, I got you. I hear you. So I have a question for you. So I was roaming around, waiting for this job to start, and I went into Bruneau Canyon, the Bruneau River. You know it?
Over by Boise?
Yeah.
Vaguely.
That place is bizarre. You talk about a basalt, like Grand Canyon, and you can't see it until you're right on top of it, and it's huge. It's like an abyss. And I've been trying to get back there. Every year I have these places I go, man, I got one kid on our crew had kayaked it when it's high enough. Mm-hmm. And he's been everywhere. He's a sponsored kayaker.
It'd be high enough this year.
I bet it would. Yeah. So I'm someday I'm going to hit you up and we'll go down there.
Yeah. My husband said he wanted to try our boys on a backpacking trip this year. I think they're big enough. And he said Beckler Meadows. And I said, well,
I don't know that. Where is that?
That's a corner of Yellowstone that's actually in Idaho that most people don't know.
Uh-huh.
We don't have a national park, but we have this chunk of Yellowstone.
Okay.
And you can backpack in. But it's heavily, it's a grizzly bear area. So I said, we have so many opportunities to try them out on backpacking. I don't think their first one's going to be into grizzly bear country. It's going to be into the White Cloud Wilderness or over in the Bruno or somewhere that I'm the last thing I have to worry about is whether or not a grizzly's going to jump.
Right, or cooking. I mean, when we were traveling in the Glacier Park, you cook one place and you move all your pots and pans and put them way out here, and then you sleep over here. And we were mostly just bivy sacking it because we were on the move. But that has to be done every night,
Toothpaste.
Yeah,
I don't think people even think about toothpaste. Toothpaste has to come out. It can't be in your bag by your head.
Right.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah. And all that meticulous stuff would be hard with little kids.
Yeah.
You know. How old are they?
10 and 12.
10 and 12, so they're getting big.
They are, and they're wild, and I love to just let them run and be kids. And when I had my first baby, I called my mom and said, I'm having a baby. And she said, I thought for sure you had your tubes tied. Mm-hmm. Like you were not having babies. It was all about my career and moving for contracts. And making my husband, my poor, bless his heart husband, follow me around the country for this crazy dream of mine.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, you're crazy. I was going to have him. I was just going to wait until I wasn't selfish anymore. And I think we're past that point now, I hope.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed is selfishness takes a back seat to like running them.
Right. And I knew everything about kids would be hard and I would feel clueless.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with being awkward.
Right.
And I'll embrace that and I'll laugh at when I do something stupid.
Yeah.
And I think if you can just settle in for the ride of parenthood,
right,
you can handle it pretty graciously and gracefully,
right,
even when you don't know what you're doing. And then in return, you get all these things that are not hard about being a parent. It's fun.
Right.
And, you can take them on the river and I don't catch as many fish when they go. But as soon as they can row that boat, I'm going to catch all those fish I haven't been catching for the last 10 years.
Right.
So it's going to come back around. And I want them to be outside. I think that's extremely important. Yeah. I don't believe that kids are inside too much. I think kids will go outside, but you're going to have to go with them.
Especially to show them everything goes off. It's just terrifying that the truth is everything goes off a role model. And one of the things you'll get, and I've got this too, is the workaholic part. If it's somewhat balanced out with hanging out with your kids, they learn that hard work, doing what you want, is a wonderful thing, and they get a positive thing. They go, man, you got to work hard, and then you get to do things you want to do. And so that role model, even though you're working too much, which I do a lot, is they see that. And it's far better than if you were kicked back in a hammock somewhere chugging your 50th Pabst Blue Ribbon on Monday.
That's true. and I'll pack gear when we camp, and they're getting big enough. You carry that tripod. You want to try to take a shot with that video camera? It doesn't matter the dollar on it. You go ahead and you try it.
Right.
I want you to know that you can do this. And,
right. That's cool.
And they'll say, I don't know really what my mom does, but I want to do it because she's outside.
Right.
And she goes cool places.
She seems very energized by her career choice.
Mildly so, right?
Yeah. So
I'm a little intense about what I do. I'm really fast and high strung, and I don't need caffeine, and I'll go.
Yeah. Which brings me to we're talking about your trail running, which is your side avocation or whatever. I don't know what you call it, but you've done a lot of that, right? Like it's a serious thing in your life.
I try not to call it serious because I don't want it to turn into work, but it is, and it's obscene. Really, is what it is. And I've always ran because I need to be in shape for my job. It would devastate me if I could not hike in with a camera on my back to get my story because I was not in shape.
Right.
That's not acceptable. So I've ran and I added distance. I'd say in the last 5 years, and I didn't think my short attention span would be able to tolerate it.
Okay.
But what I discovered was it unwinds me. I can write stories out there. I can sort things out. I can clear my head.
In your mind as you're running?
Right. And sometimes maybe I have to stop and take notes, but it will clear things. And actually, it's better for me to do it because I will run until my head shuts up. and my mouth shuts up.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot to calm me down and wind me down, and that turns into 30 miles.
And it turns into clarity of thought?
Oh, clear as day. Clear as the blue sky day you'll see. And I love where I like trail. I've never ran a road marathon.
Yeah.
I run farther.
Right.
But I do it on dirt.
So how far are you talking about?
I ran 30 miles in one run this week, and I will run a 55K race on the Continental Divide in 2 weeks.
Wow, where's
and that's
that?
34 miles. That's on the Idaho-Montana border, the Beaverheads.
Oh, really?
It's called, yeah.
I know that country for sure.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, you bet. We do that white bark harvest that I've been doing since it's 09 or something. That's in the Beaverheads.
It's beautiful, and I've ran in the Frank Church, and I've ran in all these places.
There is a grizzly or two down there by the way.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, out of Dillon. Yeah.
I'm considering the weight of a bear spray on my back, but
I think you'll be all right.
I do
mean,
too.
I would never tell you that, but if I were going to run it, I wouldn't be. It's not like Glacier Park or something.
Well, and I'm far. I'm not fast. So the people that are fast are going to clear them out before I come through there.
Right. There you go.
So I like that solitude. I work with, I have to have an instant camaraderie with strangers when I'm on a story to get an interview out of them. And so I spend a lot of time with people.
Yeah.
And when I run, I don't want to be in a crowd of people. I want to be by myself so we can make me calm down and shut up.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of miles to do that.
Yeah. So how long does it take to run 34? At altitude, right? So you're running about 7,000 down there?
10.
10. Oh, it's high. Okay.
It's high.
Yeah.
I would love to do it in 7. I think it'll take a little longer because there's some more technical things to it than the trails I train on.
Right.
It'll take a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. And what do you carry? How do you feed yourself, or can you go 7 hours without eating?
No, I can't even go 7 minutes without eating.
Right.
On a normal day, I think I burn. My metabolism's high, so I burn a lot and I eat a lot. It sounds, when I tell you what I carry, it sounds irresponsible because when I'm really out in the woods like that, I carry everything. I'm prepared for anything. Mm-hmm. But when I'm running trail, I'm wearing a very small run pack because you're trying to reduce weight, and you've got water, and you've got electrolytes in that water, and you've got food.
Right.
When I first started,
water's in a Camelback?
Yes.
Okay.
And if it's a race, you have stations where you can refill, so you're not carrying all your water.
Okay.
And if you're training, it gets tricky because you are not stopping at an aid station.
Right.
So last week I ran 30, all dirt, all dusty. It was hot, and I drank like 80 ounces of water. But you'll stop at this checks and food. I was a real food runner until recently, and I've tried to do some other things. But my first year I ran a trail race, I carried bacon on my back. And the second year I carried an avocados because when you're pushing your body like that, that clarity comes in, but it's also an awareness gets on overdrive, and you know exactly what your body needs. Right. And when I run out of, it's not really carbs, it's fat. And when I'm out of fat, I need protein, and then I need a little bit of sugar. Right. You're very aware of what you need, and when you sit on the couch, you don't do that. No, and one of the reasons I'm fascinated by this is we get paid by the bushel mostly doing trees, and so what you carry, and it's at altitude, and what you carry is how much money you're going to make. Because if you put a Milky Way and not enough water or whatever, you're gonna burn out, and that day's going to be a loss, and it's a short season. And so I'm looking for inspiration. It's nutrition's very hard. When I would run just to stay in shape for my job, I could go 3 miles, 5 miles, and I would run on an empty stomach because I didn't want it to come up. Right. And you can't do that past 10 miles. Okay. And if you do screw up, you just spent 6 months running 700 miles for a 34-mile race, and you've just blown it. Right. And nutrition takes a long time. And last year I tried 100K, and my mindset is I can do anything, and I don't quit. And I saw the video of you walking, talking in that thing, right? Yeah, it's really uncomfortable. And actually, it's really hard for me to still watch because it was a huge ego check, And it's hard to even realize I didn't finish. And now I did realize I don't run for a living. Yeah. And so those 100Ks are not for me. Even if I'm there mentally, physically, I'm not willing to wear gadgets and do things.
Right.
That's not
You're
what I do.
doing it for yourself.
And I need, the deal with my family now is like 50K is the most I'll do, because other than that, it's just it goes back to selfish, right?
Okay.
And I don't have the luxury of selfish anymore.
Yeah.
So you can screw up all of that, like you're saying, in one day because you ate one wrong thing.
Right.
You have to learn a lot about your body.
Yeah. So do you carry honey packs or anything like that?
This year I'm going to actually try some goo chews.
Yeah.
And I thought those were cheating. Mm-hmm. And then I really looked around and I said, am I cheating? And I kind of got laughed at. And I said, no, I'm serious. I'm a real food runner.
Right.
I'm not enhancing anything. I don't even have caffeine in anything.
Right.
I like that I do it on my own vibe, but I'm starving. I mean, I'm starving. I eat, and 5 minutes later, I'm delirious, and it's crazy.
That muscle's getting burned.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I was always at a deficit.
Yep.
So if you just look, if you can find things that you can eat that just have what's in food without having to waste energy digesting, that's the secret.
Okay.
So real food, you have to use some energy to digest that.
Right.
And that's where I'm learning. I'm by no means an expert on that. And the nutrition, I think, is what really blew it for me last year. I was starving at mile 30. I mean, I was starving at mile 5.
Right.
But I still went. And
does anything break down, like ankles, knees, hips? Or
I had god-awful blisters last year, and I got them at mile 5. And it was in the River of No Return, which is in the Salmon Chalice National Forest.
You bet I know it. Oh, yeah.
Right by the Middle Fork.
Yeah.
And so it happened at mile 5. My shoes weren't tied right. I mean, it's just something stupid like that. And and I ran to mile 35. And I remember standing in a stream on the race course.
All hamburgered up.
Yeah, and they were just a disgusting mess. And the water was cold, so it numbed them. And while I was standing there, I was thinking, I wish I was fishing. Because if I was fishing, I wouldn't be in last place. Yeah. Right here with these bloody nubs at the bottom of my feet. Yeah. So, but other than that, no. And I'll run with, I can run with that. I have a very high pain tolerance.
Right.
It's another weird quirk that I have.
It's also a real good one to have.
Yeah.
Especially, especially if you're going to run your feet into bloody nubs.
Right,
and then take a job in sub-zero temperatures.
That's right. I mean, we both know the wild is not for sissies. Yeah. But it just doesn't matter how tough, tiny, or timid you are. It's just how much you can endure.
Right. It is. And also, if you get to where you can, it's not just endure, but, you're just like, this is normal, right? I'm very uncomfortable. And that's normal, then the sky becomes the limit. There's so much you can do. And I did a lot of winter mountaineering at one time, and it was just like the Special Forces teach you, embrace the suck. Embrace the suck. And,
I love that.
And when you can learn to do that, the world opens in front of you. I promise, because there's so much you can do if you're not worried about being uncomfortable.
Well, and then when it opens up and you're in the middle of this massive mountain range that no one else is seeing,
right?
It's an unbelievable experience.
It's spirit, and it's discipline. It's spirituality opens with discipline.
Well, and I think, but I think you add to it when you go, oh my hell, I just got here on my own feet.
Yeah, for sure.
And no one's with me. No one's giving me a ride. Oh, they would pull up to check on you and maybe hand you a Dorito if they thought you were going to fall off the side of the mountain.
Yeah, you're looking a little pale there.
But there's something to doing it on your own horsepower.
Yep.
That is very satisfying.
For sure. And it's well, I think we're probably coming to the end of this, and we didn't even hit the public lands world.
We didn't. I will tell you that, going from Malheur and then Bears Ears a year apart.
Yeah.
We've quickly, in a few short months, gone from at Malheur saying, not on my watch. Yeah. No, saying it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
That's what we were saying at Malheur.
Right.
Bears Ears a few weeks ago, I heard it's never going to happen on my watch.
Yeah.
We've realized it's out there.
You think the block of them, of like Western and maybe American outdoorsmen and women are saying this is an honest threat to what we're going to do, and it's not going to happen on our watch? Right. Do you think that's true?
I think that it's advanced quickly. At Malheur, when I remember coming back from Malheur and talking about them walking on the ice like little duck feet with their angry face. Yeah. And everyone said, well, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean? Yep. They can't take our our public land. That's impossible.
Right.
That was 2016.
Yeah.
And now we're at 2017. No one's saying to me anymore, I don't understand what you mean.
Right.
They're saying, oh, that's not going to happen, and it's
Right.
not going to happen on my watch.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it just seemed impossible.
You bet. And I have people. I'm super lucky these days to know a lot of people younger than I am, say anywhere from 23 to 40, and there's no obliviousness there. Then there's people on my crew and people that I've been friends with since they were like 12 and 14 that we climbed together and hunted together. Who said like there's a social contract in the United States of America, and this is what government is going to do. They're going to manage our public lands because they all grew up Bitterroot, all in Montana, Idaho, and they are public land. That's all they do is hunt, fish, work Forest Service contracts, their own public land. They hike for miles. They're liberty people. They're free. And they said, this is the contract. Don't break that contract. The contract is that these are our lands managed by the federal government. And that's not going to change in my lifetime because I have a contract with my country. And it's really, they would be very angry.
To say the least.
And they're not weaklings,
I find it encouraging to see that the lights come on, and it came on fairly quickly.
Yeah.
On that issue.
Yeah. Well, that's what we should, when we get together again, that's what we ought to start off with, because it's the reason I've spent 27 years in the West and raised my family here, and when I get home, that's where I'll be. Like on Wednesday morning, I'm gonna be walking off this trip. Duluth is a wonderful place. It's great, but I'll be walking off this trip on Lewis and Clark National Forest.
Why not?
Yeah,
you can. Why will you be doing that? Because you can.
Because I can, right? Well, Kris, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I will safe travels on the way back, and I'll see you in Idaho next.
Yes, you will.